In most cases, when I watch a version of A Christmas Carol that's been adapted into a musical, it's veered too far from the core plot for me to truly enjoy, but I'm happy to say that this was an exception. Welcome to my channel, KC, that's me, Carrie Chuck the Sludge Storyteller. Here I'm talking about the storytelling as an art form, its many mediums and its history, and having fun during this Christmas season. And if you like this video, please click like. If you like this channel, please click subscribe. And while you're at it, please click the notification button. Thank you. So, Muppet Christmas Carol. Now, someone enlighten me if I'm completely off on this assessment. It seems like this is the definitive version to millennials. I know that there will always be many exceptions. It's just that those I see calling it their favorite seem to be the people who were in their childhood when it first came out in 1992. I do agree that it has proven itself to be timeless, good enough to be ranked number 3 of these 4 versions I've chosen to review. And, just that 1992 was the year I graduated from high school, and I had already been heavily invested in the versions that will be covered in the 2 remaining reviews after this one. But let me know in the comments below if you feel that way or if I'm completely off on my assessment as to what makes this a big-time favorite among many. Anyway, the movie had pretty somber production beginnings with the deaths of Mr. Muppet himself, Jim Henson, and the puppeteer of several Muppets such as Scooter and Statler, Richard Hunt, having been recent, but here are the memorials in the opening. I know the wheels had been turning already for Jim Henson to sell to Disney as well, the big plan to make a Muppet Christmas Carol. But let's again start with categories. So Michael Caine, the well-known backstory goes that he didn't want the role unless he could play essentially straight, where he'd act the same way as if he were working with real people actors, on the Shakespearean stage. And while there's enough of a comedic approach to have some sequences be that he had a semi-comedic story in mind, beyond that, his Scrooge is very mean-spirited and snarky, but it does have that quality of Scrooge's believability, that gradual change of heart that we see throughout this movie. Okay, this is guaranteed to mess with my love of this particular scene and this particular story. In a Muppet production, it's criminal not to find a place for Statler and Waldorf in it. I mean, I'll go as far as to say that they're my all-time favorite heckler characters, as I grew up watching them in The Muppet Show. And I agree that here's where the characters were best used. They emphasize all the wrongs in life, sang a catchy song, and all that while working in that trademark heckling. That said, I'm glad I have more serious adaptations of the story to fall back on, because this is a scene in which I'd normally watch for its warning to a cold-hearted man, coupled with deep probing into a life that fell into deep regret for that same reason, and to show the pain in Marley for all that suffering he's been going through those past 7 years. And while that kind of depiction is most meaningful to me, the charm of the depictions here and the catchy song, it makes this scene still worthwhile. Just like Statler and Waldorf as the Marleys, who else is going to play Bob Cratchit but Kermit the Frog? And who else could be Mrs. Cratchit than Miss Piggy? Which automatically means that Robin will be Tiny Tim, and other small versions of Miss Piggy and Kermit will play their other kids. Kermit brings his Kermit emotions to work perfectly as Scrooge's clerk, with few options to keep him and his family afloat, while holding hopes that he will find answers to Tiny Tim's health problems. You know that Miss Piggy is going to be the Mrs. Cratchit who brings attitude to spare, as she's just the one to bring it. And if Mrs. Cratchit is going to get irked over Scrooge's harshness towards Bob, you know that Miss Piggy is going to be the Mrs. Cratchit who brings attitude to spare, as she's the one to bring it, and bring it to the nth degree. And Robin does bring that childlike sweetness to bring so much Tiny Tim emotion as he sings of family closeness during Christmas time. So yes, Kermit and Piggy more than ably round out the Cratchit household here. I think that Disney did the right thing of, instead of trying to fill a Muppet character square peg into a Muppet Christmas character ghost of a round hole, the angelic characterization of the Ghost of Christmas Past works in the pantheon of other great depictions before and since the movie's release. It begins this segment, like most others, with the little boy Scrooge in boarding school all alone, while the gradual phasing of his growth is interesting. I wish they hadn't left out the part where Scrooge's sister, Fan, comes and picks him up to take him home. The fact that Scrooge's former employer's very name is Fezziwig makes it an axiom that you have to cast Fozzie in that role and make a minor adjustment to the name into Fozziewig. It seems that the filmmakers felt that the sad breakup song that was meant to accompany Belle's leaving young Scrooge in the movie, because of his obsession with wealth, would convolute the Christmas Past segment. And I know I'm not the only one who feels it should have been included still. And I even feel like the whole Christmas Past segment of this version feels shorter than it should be. So I think that it should have been included, all the more reason. But there's still plenty to love about that segment. So in the novella, as well as several depictions, they have caused me to automatically expect the Ghost of Christmas Present to be larger than life. And the Muppet Christmas Carol did not disappoint in that regard, and they created a robustly built Muppet modeled directly from the traditional design. And he sings a catchy, jolly song befitting that segment, and it gets right to your heart. The aforementioned scene of the Cratchit dinner is bared up well with the observational exchange between the ghost and Scrooge. And as I have always expected, Scrooge finds himself owned when the Ghost of Christmas Present uses his own words against him about the surplus population. Now, the way Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come was modeled, it was nothing special. For me, I didn't see the point of his disproportionately long arms. He was not particularly as ominous as you'd expect from such a phantom form. It was supposed to get Scrooge's knees knocking, and I guess they were aiming low in that regard, knowing that kids would be part of this audience. So that means the quality of the segment rests largely on Michael Caine, and he does deliver as you'd expect. He gets more and more weary of just whose death everybody's talking about, and mourns in regret over Tiny Tim's death. The old Joe scene where he's depicted as a spider was pretty over the top, even for Muppet standards. But the big reveal of Scrooge's grave leads to a more believable performance by Caine as one who is both desperate and resolved to make the change toward the people he has oppressed and beyond. The redemption segment checks the boxes when it comes to Scrooge calling on the little boy getting the turkey that will go to the Cratchits, and here it was the little boy who was the caroler who Scrooge shooed off earlier in the movie. Also, Scrooge's follow-up with the charity collectors with a banger of the pledge. That's played out very well, and I always love Bunsen and Beaker. The song that Caine sings with an enthused crowd following him, it's my favorite of the entire movie. As far as I've been able to read up on, Michael Caine has not been one to sing in his starring roles, but here he can more than carry a tune in a safe yet sweet song of Christmas jubilation. While heavily modified, the last scene of Scrooge sternly approaching Bob Cratchit before shedding that persona to announce that he'll be getting a raise. Now that worked very well. I might have thought that it was a wrongful turn from the usual, reserving that exchange for the next day at Scrooge's place of business, if not for Mrs. Cratchit's piggy attitude threatening actual violence. Then that very warm number sung by Scrooge, the Cratchits, Fred Halliwell, and I guess all the neighbors, beautifully rendered, very heartwarming, gets right to you. Okay, this aspect deserves its own segment in this particular video. What makes this the typical Muppet style narration, in this case by Gonzo portraying a Christmas Carol author, Charles Dickens, with his comic sidekick Rizzo the Rat, a narrative match made in heaven with the story itself. I'm way overdue in reading such other Dickens works as Oliver Twist, David Copperfield, and the Pickwick Papers to see if the narrative style is similar to these other works. But what I think stands out about the narration in the novella is how that narrative frequently would make side note comments, and Gonzo's seemingly off-the-cuff dialogue feels much in the same spirit. So while I would never call the Muppet Christmas Carol the most accurate adaptation, the narrative style feels like it's cut from the same cloth. It's not my favorite, but I totally get those who've made it theirs. Michael Caine brings his A-game to the part. The Muppets' personalities blend in perfectly with the characters they've been cast as. The Muppet comedy is worked beautifully, and the songs implemented in the story blend in beautifully as well. That's my take on the Muppet Christmas Carol. Agree? Disagree? Something I left out? Please let me know in the comments section. The link to order the Sledge comic miniseries is just below there in the description, in both digital and paper format. Give it a look. But let's all look for civility amid all the bad news out there, social, political strife. Let's not hate. Let's find friends wherever we may go. Everyone be safe.
God bless us, everyone.